It's a great pleasure to welcome Jan Roux, who is the executive of the Digital Workplace Management at BCX. And boy, oh boy, do we know how the workplace has changed over the last 3 years, and it does continue to evolve. Jan, it's really good to see you. Welcome to What's Next. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Aki. Appreciate it.
Listen, Jan, I mean, there's all sorts of different acronyms and words that people are using. And in this case, we're talking about DWM, which stands for Digital Workspace Management. What exactly is Digital Workspace Management?
So the Digital Workspace Management is a business unit within BCX that's focusing on the end-user computing side. Now, I think we will all agree that the end-user space have changed significantly, even prior to the COVID, but I think COVID just accelerated that change. So DWM is a business unit that the sole purpose is around focusing on the digital workspace management side. Traditionally, like I said, the end-user space was very much focused around the end-user device, whether it's a notebook or a PC, sitting at some sort of campus environment. And with the digital workspace evolution, I mean, the whole area has really changed around how we deal with the end-user support side. So suddenly, it's not just about the endpoint device, but really the digital workspace is around technology, applications, various endpoint devices, whether it might be tablets, wearables, mobile phones, definitely, obviously the notebook environment. So the whole digital workspace management area is around this whole ecosystem that the end user now needs to live in, and that they need to be enabled to be able to do their job. And that's really the focus around digital workspace management versus the old traditional end user space.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, and I think when you look at it, and you described it really well, because if you look at that ecospace, before it was really largely focused a lot around hardware, right? And you had the software around it, and we've got all sorts of other layers of complexity that come into this. There's the cyber threats, for example. It's what are you putting up in the cloud? How are you using those kind of things? So you correctly say, I mean, this evolution, and that's I guess the question I want to ask you is how did the evolution of the digital workspace change the way that ICT service providers have had to look at traditional end user support? Because we've seen huge changes over the last few years.
Absolutely, and it completely changed the game for us. So where we sort of tend to focus, we used to focus on the endpoint, like I said, whether it was the notebook or the endpoint device. It was a very simple environment for us. It was ring-fenced in a campus environment. Perimeter security was dealt with by the security team. And suddenly, the whole market changed. And there's numerous things that sort of added to the complexity. So when it comes to something as simple as just all these different components that makes up the digital workspace now, like I said, software, you think about connectivity, you think about applications, and anything in between. Suddenly, not just around the endpoint device, even the skills that you need to have now and the visibility of this environment you need to have. So definitely increase the complexity. Hand in hand with that, obviously, the end users, they I don't want to call it spoiled, but definitely much more greater flexibility, work from home, mobile users. You need to offer a wide range of support, and irrespective of the environment of this end user, they actually expect you to be flexible enough to need to offer them the support irrespective of the environment that they operate in. And that user experience, whether they're using a tablet, wearables, mobile phones, notebooks, again, seamless intuitive sort of experience to make sure that you really focus around the endpoints environment. So we definitely had to take a step back and make sure that we actually got visibility of this environment, because it just added so much more to the environment that we need to support. So proactive monitoring is something that became more and more important for us. It's something that you can't do without because of all these different components. And you mentioned it in the beginning, the security. Suddenly, security, which never was really apart from the endpoint antivirus type security that we used to worry about, suddenly with these mobile users using all different applications, etc., security is critical. All the way from the endpoint device, all the way to sort of the cloud environment that integrates these endpoint devices.
Absolutely fascinating. And I guess that when you start talking about security and all these different layers, there's a lot of complexity. Let's be honest, it's not the same as it was 5 years ago, as you correctly mentioned. So my question is, how on earth does BCX ensure the efficient management of the digital workspace? How do you do it?
So like I mentioned when we kicked off, is that the first thing we did was we really realized that it needs to be a focused environment. So we actually ring-fenced it and said, listen, it can't be an afterthought. We really need to make sure that we need to look at this holistically, end to end. So we actually got a dedicated business unit looking after just endpoint devices or end user support or the digital workspace management area. That includes a whole combination of things. We've got a dedicated, what we call the nerve center, and that really is sort of a command center that gives us visibility. Now, obviously, this visibility 24/7. We've got a whole range of tools that we've deployed that measures everything from the physical applications that the users use, the hardware devices, the speed of the connectivity, and very much a proactive approach. The key thing is that because of the fact that we've got end users now spread literally across the world, not more in a campus environment, that old way of having a sort of hacker techie or desktop engineer running around doing support just doesn't work anymore. So the remote support is absolutely critical. So we've got this nerve center using a combination of tools and processes and obviously people doing the support, monitoring it, getting alerts, jumping in, and the main focus is really fixing these issues before it actually impacts the end users. And that's the key focus for us, is around making sure that even something as simple as auto healing, learn from our experiences, detect issues, make sure that if we detect something that we've seen in the past for a user that's sitting in London versus someone that might be sitting in Joburg, we detect those issues, we go in, and we actually very often the tools can actually remediate that issue before it impacts on the end user, because the option of sending someone out is just not there anymore. We need to be able to do it remotely using tools and technology.
It's actually very interesting. You think of how much you can preempt, right? What you can see, the visibility that you have of what the users are doing, what's coming, and what possible dangers could be lurking around there. You can preempt a lot of that stuff. And even from a hardware point of view, we were talking a few weeks ago, for example, like if a hard disk is about to fail, for example, you get preempted on that sort of thing, and you prevent that from happening when it does happen. Now, when you look at this and you look at the traditional way of measuring performance, and we talk about SLAs and all that sort of thing, are SLAs still relevant in this digital workspace era?
I suppose it's definitely moving, in my personal view, moving away from the traditional way of, the old, it was a very reactive type of approach, time to respond, time to repair, I suppose in desktop, a little bit of uptime, and the problem is that it's very much reactive. It's very much device focused, which is not ideal. As we said, there's just too much moving pieces in this whole environment now to look at that traditional way of dealing with SLAs. So the reality is that, and we believe at BCX, that unless you can actually measure, we call it the digital satisfaction score. So the end user needs to be able to be productive. He needs to be able to work. Now, the fact that if something breaks, I can meet SLA every single day if it goes wrong. But if it goes wrong every single day on the same end user, it's not a productive user, and it sort of impacts on the business. Now, we believe moving away from the traditional SLA, which I suppose is a bit of a mind shift change for a lot of the CIOs and a lot of the business out there, but definitely looking more away from the hardware component and putting almost that end user in the middle, and all these layers of the digital workspace around him, hardware, software, applications, connectivity, and even the end user's experience. So we've got the ability for an end user to actually tell us that he's not happy with the way things are going. He feels his application is too slow. He feels it takes too long for him to print at home or from his home office or from wherever he is. So we believe moving away from the sort of reactive, typical response time type SLA to a more user-focused end-user satisfaction score, which really filters down to that net promoter score from your employees. So
Yes.
very much align the end user satisfaction rather than looking at individual reactive SLA type approach.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see the how things have shifted, from that point of view, because the parameters have changed, the dynamics have changed, and when you talk about the net promoter score, it's interesting, and the productivity, and I guess if you compare the productivity of people remote working today versus at the start of the pandemic in 2020, for example, I'm pretty sure that people are a lot more productive today because we've learned so much. So when you look at the business benefits, what would those business benefits be of a higher employee net promoter score?
There you go. So I think that's actually what's so key for us. Now, I think historically, maybe the end user support side was always a little bit of a grudge purchase because you've got these folks running around fixing problems, and there was very little business benefit. With this new focus around the end user and making sure that the digital wellness or the digital satisfaction score is a good score for the end users, we truly believe that by increasing the net promoter score for end user, there's definitely a direct translation around the business benefit that a company can get. Now, I think we will all agree that sort of employee retention is key. There's a huge skill shortage out there. And in the market, we need to compete. The companies out there compete for the best skills, and having happy employees, without a doubt, makes them more productive. It definitely filters down ultimately to the business and the competitiveness of those businesses. And that's why we see the end user space, and when we actually engage with a client, not just as a grudge purchase or a reactive purchase, making sure that things keep on working, we actually truly believe there's a business benefit in the way we actually deal with our clients. Directly, if clients or customers or the employees are happy, they definitely treat their customers better. So customer satisfaction is definitely a very good spin-off. And sort of all those spin-off benefits that comes from having happier employees because they are more productive, less issues, working in a very stable and innovative sort of environment. Definitely filters through to the clients and their clients.
Now, Jan, you've been in the business for a lot more than 2 decades, and you've been in the role as a CIO, you've been there as a managing director. I mean, you've seen it all in this ICT industry, and there's been tremendous changes in the time that you've started. Where is this digital workspace going? Where is this environment going? Is it, and I guess there's been such massive strides being made in the last few years, and it continues to evolve, I guess, is probably one of the answers. But when you look at where we're going and you compare this to traditional ICT service providers, are people ready for these changes that are happening, and where do you see it all going?
Yeah, I think the end user space has probably been one of those, and probably COVID definitely helped a little bit, but definitely sort of catapulted us into a completely different environment, and both from an expectation, so the employee expectation side, and from technology side. Now, if you look at the employee expectation side, suddenly what used to be the norm is completely out the window. Yes, there's still the office environment, etc., but the reality is that the expectation of these employees actually changed. They need flexibility. They need a well-balanced work environment. And that's something that we need to take into consideration when we actually build our engagement model with our clients. So on the one side, when it comes to operational way and how we deal with it, we look at the employee side and their expectations of how they actually want to build the environment that they're working. From a technology side, I think we've only seen the peak of the iceberg. Now, digital workspace, like I mentioned, it's around applications and hardware and connectivity, everything that falls around it. But we've seen that there's so much technology coming through that will definitely impact on the way we do business. We're talking about artificial intelligence. I think we literally is at the beginning of something that is going to be major. It's going to be massive on how we actually deal with it. Now, we need, as an ICT provider, need to be ready to cope with that, to cope with things like artificial intelligence, machine learning. We can't, there's a skill shortage. So we have to make sure that when we engage with clients, the way we support them, the way we actually deal with them on a day-to-day basis, we actually build that intellectual IP that we used to sit in the heads of technical resources running around, because the scale is just not there anymore. Put it into things like machine learning, artificial intelligence. There's automated routines. So literally, and not just for us as a service provider, but even when it comes to our clients, they're going to have exactly the same technology to them as well. So suddenly, it's sort of the exponential growth in these additional technologies that we keep on encountering, that we as a service provider need to be able to support. The key thing for us is to make sure that we're actually ahead of that curve, to make sure that we preempt those, and to make sure that we actually can support those without the real impact of the end user or the business. Because what we need to become is not really just a reactive service provider, but a business enabler, using and assisting our clients to be able to use all these technologies to grow their businesses as well.
Absolutely fascinating. It will be interesting to have a chat in a year from now, and even in 5 years from now, to compare our discussion today, Jan, and where it's going. But it's certainly evolving, and it's evolving at a very fast pace. And as you say, you've got to stay ahead of the curve, because if you don't stay ahead of the curve, it's going to be to the detriment of your business. And of course, other organizations are staying ahead of the curve. They are being more productive. They are getting the maximum value out of their employees working in that digital workspace. Jan Roux, absolutely fantastic chatting to you, Executive for Digital Workplace Management at BCX. Jan, thank you for joining us on What's Next.
Thanks, Ati. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.